Hi, my name is Lilly and today I want to give you some advanced bow drill tips. Stay tuned. Okay guys, today I'm sitting here in the wilderness because I want to share my knowledge that I gained from making several bow drills. And the first thing I want to talk about is really the choice of wood. So there are a few woods that are better for bow drill making than others. For example, it's easier to make bow drills with softwood. Poplar works great, basswood works great, willow, hazel, stuff like that. I have put some woods into the description of the video so that you can read what woods you can use for the bow drill set. And the next thing, which is very important, is that you use wood which comes from a dry, dead standing tree. So you don't want to pick up wood that's lying around on the ground because it usually soaks up the moisture from the ground and from the rain. And dead standing tree usually is very dry at the very inside, so that's the next important thing. For example, if you cut off a dead branch, this was a dead hanging basswood branch here, and if you cut off this branch, you want to take a bigger diameter size of wood than, for example, the spindle is going to be. So you cut this off and then you want to you carve out the outer layers of the wood, and you want to make the spindle right from the center of the wood, okay? You don't want to take any parts from the edges of the wood, because usually when there's rain and moisture, the wood sucks it up and it's going to stay at the outer layers of the bark. And the more you come into the center, the drier the wood is going to be. This is especially important in wintertime. The next topic that I read a lot about in survival books is the wood combinations. For example, in a lot of survival books you read that you should use softer wood for the fireboard and harder wood for the spindle. But I don't think that's true really, because I've used all kinds of combinations. I've made the spindle harder, I've made the fireboard harder. I've used the same wood for both the spindle and the fireboard, and it all worked. So I think that's just secondary. Okay, the next thing that you need is a bow for your bow drill kit. In this case it's rather a stick than a bow. I think it's better if you're using a stick that is not very flexible, like this one here. I've seen a lot of people using very flexible bows, and I think the big disadvantage of using a bow is really that at the very end, when drilling, you need some, powerful strokes to ignite the ember, and it can happen that then the bow bends too much and then the string is loosened up a little bit and you might slip through with your spindle. And that would be very bad at the end of bow drilling, because it's important that at the end you have a lot of tension on the string. And the bow should be as long as your arm, because you should use all the length of your arm. You want to make very long strikes. I'm seeing a lot of people on YouTube who make very small, movements, but that is very bad, because you want to have this whole length and use the whole length of the bow. You want to come from here to here, because every time you stop the bow, the spindle will stop, and therefore you're not creating heat. So the longer the bow and the longer the strikes, the more rotations you're going to have in less time. So that's very important. The next thing is, I'm seeing a lot of people using the bow drill like this, from right to left. And I think that's pretty awkward, because with that technique you're only using your arm instead of using the shoulder. For example, when I'm bow drilling, I come from the back side, up front and back, so I can push the bow with my shoulder here, and therefore I have a lot of more power than doing it from the sides, which is very awkward. But I'm seeing a lot of people doing it like this, and I think it's much easier to go from the back side to the front, because that's a more natural movement, I think. And yeah, that's the one thing about the bow which you can consider when you're making a bow drill kit. And then there's one more thing that we have to discuss, which is carving the notch. Okay, let's take a closer look at the notch of this fireboard here. And in most survival books you read that they make the notches quite narrow and right into the center of the bow drill hole. But then I saw a video of Native Survival from Mitch, and he suggested to make the notch a little bit more at the outside with a very wide angle. And I've tried that once and it worked so much better that I'm now always doing it like this. And what's the big advantage of making this wide angled notch? It's simply because the dust that is ground up from the edges of the hole here is usually much hotter than the dust that comes from the middle. And that's what you want essentially. You want to collect the hotter dust that comes from the edges. And the good thing about the wide angled notch here is that you basically have more oxygen that comes into the dust, and with more oxygen the ember is going to form more easily. There's one more thing that you need for the bow drill, some kind of bearing block, and it's good if you use hardwood and green wood, or maybe you find a stone which has a cavity, and yeah, you really want to reduce friction, so it's a good idea if you use, for example, moss or leaves and stuff it into the hole so it doesn't have a lot of friction. And sometimes knife handles have a cavity, which is great to use. And I usually use this bearing block here, which is a rollerblade wheel, which is very good for beginners. It doesn't have a lot of friction. And yeah, it's a little bit like cheating, but I still like to use it, you know. And yeah, now let's try to create an ember and do some bow drilling. Okay, I usually take some leaf or bark that I want to collect the dust in. And then I set the fireboard on the leaf. Okay, we have produced a pretty good ember. And now I'll take away the fireboard without destroying the ember. And next we want to let the ember breathe a little bit and grow and let it settle. Okay, here I have collected some grass, but it's not really dry, so we will see if this works. And the important thing when making a bird's nest is that you use very fine material, and it should be especially very fine where the ember is going to be so that the ember doesn't fall apart. That's important. The next important thing is that you transport the ember to the bird's nest without destroying it. Yeah, there's one more thing to say. It's good if you have pre-dried materials at home and practice with that. But it's something completely different if you take fresh materials that you have freshly collected in the woods. It's so much more difficult. So yeah, you should really challenge yourself and try to make a bow drill set right from nature without taking it with you. There are a lot of odds that come against you when it comes to making a bow drill set right from the woods. So I want to thank you for watching. Please check out Mitch from Native Survival. He has this awesome channel on YouTube. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more.